Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new edition of Mazza on Mets, where we talk all things New York Mets baseball. We got a lot to get into today on the show as the New York Mets just completed a split of the Atlanta Braves in their four-game series, winning the last two after losing the first two, and now go on the road to Pittsburgh this weekend for with a bit of momentum after going 0 for 5 against the Braves and losing 2 out of 3 against the Philadelphia Phillies. But there's also a lot of news to get into. We got to talk about Griffin Canning. We have to talk about Frankie Montas, Sean Manaea, the update on Sean Manaea, some more roster moves that have come up over the last over today during the last couple of hours today. The return of Mark Vientos. So we got to get a lot into today on the show. But we begin with the series against the Atlanta Braves. Obviously, the Mets came into the series going 1-5 on their National League Eastern Division road trip. They got swept by Atlanta 3. They lost 2 out of 3 to Philadelphia. So they really came into the series, losing 8 of their last 9. They needed some momentum. They needed to win some ball games. They needed to kind of get back into the thick of things. They had dropped first place. They were in second place by I think a game and a half or so. Or I think by a game. Yeah, they were behind the Phillies in first place by a game heading into the series against the Atlanta Braves. The Philadelphia Phillies had an off day on Monday before they played the Houston Astros Tuesday through Thursday. The Mets needed some wins. They needed some wins to just kind of get back on track. And unfortunately, on Monday, that didn't work. That things didn't start out that way. Paul Blackburn started. Actually, he didn't do too bad that on Monday. Paul Blackburn, he didn't do too bad. But the Mets offense again, it's kind of held in check. The only offense they got on Monday was a Juan Soto 2-run homer that got the Mets back in the game, but that was as far as they could go. They went 0 for 2 runs scoring position. Soto actually had a opportunity in the bottom of the eighth, I believe, but he struck out. But still, the Mets offense really couldn't muster up much. 2 runs. The only 2 runs they got was the home by Soto. 6 hits. Paul Blackburn was okay. 4 2/3, 6 hits, 3 earned runs, 3 walks, 5 strikeouts. He did kind of settle in as the game went on, Blackburn. But Budo came in. Stanek came in. Garrett did all right. Edwin Diaz did all right. I mean, the Mets bullpen, Blackburn wasn't great, but they did okay. The Mets bullpen did everything they could. The bullpen that's been a bit maligned over the last, week or so came in and did their job. Actually, did their job twice. We'll get to yesterday's game in this series, but the Mets bullpen kept them in the game. They kept them in the game. They kept them, in it. But the offense, again, aside from Juan Soto, didn't really do much against Spencer Schwellenbach and the Braves bullpen. The Braves bullpen after Schwellenbach, I think he pitched 7 innings, 4 strikeouts. Iglesias came in. I gave up a couple of hits when they took him out for Lee, who struck out, of course, Soto, and then closed it out in the ninth. So again, Mets didn't hit. Blackburn was okay. They got some pitching. Blackburn was okay. Bullpen was very good, but it was the offense again that just didn't step up. It didn't step up. It didn't wasn't able to come through, and it wasn't able to come through. I think their best opportunity was Soto in the bottom of the eighth, but he struck out on the slider. But even still, he was the only offense that could even muster up with the 2-run homer to get them back into the game. But that was the final score of that one. Final score of that game, 3-2. Game 2, Frankie Montas makes his debut, and I know, and a lot of people were kind of wondering, oh, hey, how is Montas going to do? The struggles in the minor leagues. How's he going to do? How's he going to go? He's facing the Braves offense. It's a division rival. Well, as it turns out, Frankie Montas was all he had to do was pitch in the big leagues. And again, I brought it up before, but I didn't make a big deal out of. Again, you would have liked to have seen him pitch well in the minor leagues, but I didn't make that big of a deal of it because I was like, let Montas get to the big leagues. He's a big league pitcher. He's working, he hadn't had a spring training because he got hurt well before spring training, or at least during spring training. So he didn't really have any spring training to begin with, didn't really have any starts in spring training. So I did give him a bit of a pass. I know that wasn't very popular amongst Met fans and around New York to give Montas a pass, and the Mets obviously weren't happy. But I gave him a bit of a pass. I was like, you know what? Let him get to the big leagues. Let him get to the big leagues. Let him get to the major league level. Let him get to where he's comfortable in, which is pitching in major league games. He obviously had a lot of things to work on because again, he hadn't had a spring training. You know, this is obviously his first year in a new organization. So let's see what. And I also said, just let Jeremy Hefner get his hands on him. Just let Jeremy Hefner go to work and get his hands on him. And Frankie Montas, hey, pitched really well. If the Mets ended up losing this game, the Mets lost this game 7-4. But the big positive in this game to come out of it was the performance of Frankie Montas. 5 innings, five strikeouts. He did walk three, but 5 strikeouts, 5 innings of work. You know, did a great job. He did a great job against a good Braves lineup. So if he looked effective, he looked comfortable. Um, so again, I think the biggest positive to come out of this game is Montez's performance. And I think if you're a Met fan, if you're the Mets, you need to be very encouraged by that because again, they're going to need him now, and we'll get to another reason why they're going to need Montez in a bit. But of course, that wasn't the whole story of this game. They were up. They got off to a quick start, 3-0. They got off to a quick start. They're up 3-0, going to the top of the sixth. Montez is out of the game because again, only his first start, limited his pitches, innings. His first start. It's June, so let's see. So obviously he was only going to about go five. They scored 3 runs early in the bottom of the fourth, or excuse me, in the bottom of the fourth, they scored 3 runs on a Brett Beatty RBI base hit. They get on the board, so they're up 3-0. They're up 3-0. Soto walked, stole a base. Alonso singled in. Marte walked. McNeil got a sac fly. Torrens walked. Beatty got a base hit that drove in two. So now you're up 3-0. Bullpen comes into the game, and the bullpen, which was so good the day before, struggles here. Brazoban could not throw a strike in the top of the sixth. He walks all 3 guys he faces, bases loaded, nobody out, and from there the Braves just took advantage of it. Nick Gallen, Reed Garrett had to come into the game. Reed Garrett had to come into the game. Eli White got a base hit. Drake Baldwin walked, made it 3-1. Eli White base hit, 3-2. Nick Allen base hit, tied at 3. Matt Olson base hit, 5-3 Atlanta. And once again, for the fourth time in several games, the Mets had a lead in the middle innings, but the bullpen, or at least late in the game, but the pitching, starting, bullpen, whatever, isn't able to hold it. And the Mets offense wasn't able to get back into the game. They don't score again until the bottom of the ninth on a Ronnie Mauricio RBI double. Lindor did come up as a tying run, up 7-4, but he grounded out. But even still, the Mets offense from the innings 5 through 8 struggles to score runs to at least get back in it. But again, you had a 3-0 lead. Bullpen's doing, Montez pitched pretty good. Hand off to the bullpen, and now it's like, oh, okay, hey, just like I said before, get the ball to Edwin Diaz in the next 3 innings, but they weren't able to. Brazoban struggled, couldn't throw a strike. Reed Garrett, did his best to try to limit the Braves offense, but again, that didn't. But again, he gives up a couple. Jorge Castillo. Jorge Castillo gives up a couple of hits. Then they go to Garrett. He gives up a hit and a walk. Jorge Castillo, 2 hits, 2 runs, 2 earned runs. Jose Castillo. So again, bullpen in 1 inning, this kind of falters, and the Braves and the opposing team takes advantage of it, and the Mets end up losing the game. It was the 4th time in the last several games it happened. It happened in Tampa Bay, game 1. It happened in Atlanta with Peterson and Reed Garrett in the first game. It happened in Philadelphia in the first game. And then it happened here in Atlanta in the second game of the series. So again, not exactly ideal for this team, where you get a lead and you get the middle innings or the late innings and you can't hold on to it. Or at least in Philadelphia's case, it was a tie game and the game ended up getting away from because they scored 6 runs and then 2 runs to make it 10-2 from the 7th inning to the 9th. But having said that, again, you lose the first 2, you're 0 for 5 against the Braves, and now you're thinking, oh boy, here we go again. And you've now lost 10 of your last 11. Everyone's going, hey, what's going on here? What's going on here? What's going on here? So that made Wednesday night's game, I would say, a pretty close to a must win. I know you don't like to say must win games in June, But Wednesday night ended up being a must-win game. They had to get a win against Atlanta. You could not lose this series, and you could not. I said coming in, I said they had to win 3 out of 4. So they already couldn't do that, but they had to win 3 out of 4. So now you at least try for a split. You had to win Wednesday night's game. You had to get a win. You had to just get a win against Atlanta, and get off. Get that one win off. Get that one win, and get back into the series and try for a split. And they did that on Wednesday night. They were able to follow up the last 2 games, and a 3-game losing streak with one of their best offensive performances of the season. Juan Soto hit 2 home runs, his fourth game already this season with 2 home runs, which is pretty incredible. That Juan Soto has 4 2-home run games this year, or Chicago, or maybe not Chicago, Arizona twice, this one, and Philadelphia. So Arizona twice, Philadelphia and Philadelphia, and then this one, and this game against the Braves. Um, but 7-3, they win the game. 13 hits, 7 runs. Like I said, 2 home runs by Juan Soto. Got a decent pitching performance out of Clay Holmes. Once again, he only goes 5 innings, walked 4, but again, not too bad. At least a decent performance from Clay Holmes in this game. Ronnie Mauricio hit a home run. We'll get to him in a bit. Soto's 2 home runs. Beatty got an RBI. Lindor got an RBI. Marte an RBI hit. Nimmo an RBI. So they stepped up big on Wednesday night and got a good win. So now you had to take that win and follow it up to last night. You had to at least guarantee you a split. To at least guarantee you a split. They had to follow up Wednesday night's game, Wednesday night's win, with a good performance on Thursday night. And they did just that. However, the big story of this game was Griffin Canning. Griffin Canning, who looked very effective. This is Thursday night. He looked very effective through 2 1/3 innings. Actually, I would say he was looking like he was going to have a Canning kind of performance that we saw against the Dodgers, the Yankees, the Cubs. The Canning we've seen of late against Washington, Chicago, Tampa Bay. Yeah, he struggled a bit. Even Philadelphia. I feel he was okay against Philadelphia. Actually, he was okay against Philly, but it looked like in that game where they scored a bunch of runs and hit 7 solo home runs, but he was okay against Philadelphia that night. Uh, but he looked like vintage Griffin Canning. He looked like the Canning that we saw pitch really, really well through the first 2 months of the season. He looked like he was going to have that kind of vintage Canning 2025 performance, but unfortunately, we saw what we saw. Ground ball to Lindor. This is in the third inning, fourth inning. I want to say. I think it was in the third inning. I think it was in the third. Trying to remember. I think it was in the third. Yes, it was in the third inning. Canning had already gotten. It was a ground ball to Lindor, and Lindor threw to first. But as the play is happening, Canning steps off the mound, and he ends up rupturing his Achilles. It was made official today by the New York Mets that Griffin Canning has suffered a ruptured Achilles, a ruptured left Achilles, and he's out for the season. Um, yeah, we'll touch on Canning's injury here. This is another blow to this. This is another blow. This is another blow to the Mets starting rotation. You know, it's another blow to the starting rotation. To add on with Senga's injury, to add on with Senga's injury, to add on with Tyler McGill's injury, to Monta. Obviously, Montas just come back. Sean Manaea, who is still on the mend and trying to come back. This is another blow to the Mets starting rotation. And Canning was having a pretty solid year. He looked like a very good back end of the rotation kind of guy, and someone who the Mets can rely on. And unfortunately, this is just a horrible luck injury, just one little step back on the mound, and just the Achilles just snapped. So, yeah, it's you feel for him because he had a prove-it year. I think the Mets signed to about a 2-year contract. It was a prove-it year for him. He had his struggles over in Los Angeles. He was, I think, DFA'd by the Atlanta Braves, or waived, I think. This was he was having this is a guy with a 5 ERA last year, a 4 ERA in his career, and you didn't expect the things he was doing this year for the Mets, but the Mets went to work with him. He went to work with the Mets, and he was pitching the best performance of his career to this point. and unfortunately, he won't be able to finish it. And it sucks for him. You feel for him, and you obviously feel for the Mets, but you most especially feel for him. It's a horrible injury. It's a horrible luck injury, and you hope that he makes a great speedy recovery to pitch again next year for the Mets. But obviously, for this season for the Mets, it now adds adding a starting pitcher a lot more a lot more important now entering the trade deadline next month. And now it makes David Stearns adding another arm in that rotation even more important. So, but back to the game, you give a lot of credit to the Mets pitching. Austin Warren comes in and he was fantastic. We'll read the stats here. Austin Warren comes into the game, obviously on quick notice, 2 1/3, 2 strikeouts, 1 hit. He was fantastic. He was fantastic last night. Then Nunez comes in and he looks for the first. Nunez has pitched pretty well since coming back from AAA after they sent them back down. After they sent them back down and he came back, he's pitched pretty well since coming back. But last night was his true vintage performance where he looked like the Daniel Nunez of a year ago. 2 innings, 4 strikeouts, slider was effective, fastball was effective. He looked like his vintage self from a year ago before his injury, where he came in and he got big out after big out after big out after big out, especially at a time last year when Edwin Diaz was having his ups and downs. He had been injured, suspended. So Nunez really stepped up last year for this team in the middle of the season before his injury. So they and with AJ Minter's injury and Danny Young's injury and and other arms in that bullpen, like Braziban has now been inconsistent as of late, and Stanek has had his inconsistencies this season, although he's pitched pretty well as of late. Reed Garrett's had his inconsistencies as of late, even though he's pitched overall well. Pretty much everyone aside from Edwin Diaz in this bullpen has had their inconsistencies as of late. And they've been mixing and matching parts all around the bullpen over the past week or so. They really need Daniel Nunez to step up and be the guy that he was a year ago. If that's the case, boy, that is such a big plus for this bullpen. Still need another arm or two, I think, but that is such a big plus for this bullpen if Daniel Nunez is able to step up. Nunez comes in, he pitches 2 innings, and he's fantastic. Ryan Stanek comes in, he pitches a very solid, effective 1 inning. And when Diaz comes in, gives up a hit to Matt Olson, but overall retired the side, struck out one in the ninth to get us in the ninth. So big win for the Mets. A big win for the Mets, and a great job by the Mets pitching to step up after Canning went down with the injury. As Warren, Nunez, Stanek, and Diaz all combined, along with Canning, but after Canning's injury, they all combined to pitch the shutout against the Atlanta Braves. As the Mets won the game 4-0 to split the series from the Braves. Pete Alonso drove in an RBI with a base hit. Jeff McNeil had a RBI hit that drove in two. Soto and Alonso. That was actually key. Tyrone Taylor had a sac fly, which first got the Mets on the board. That was actually key because it was two on Jeff McNeil's RBI single. There was 2 outs and nobody on. So, but then Juan Soto got a base hit. Pete Alonso, I think, drew a walk, or he got a base hit. Let me double check that. I think he walked. Or no, I think he got a base hit. Yes, oh no, I think he got a base hit. I think Pete got a base hit in that inning. Let me just double check on the old scoreboard, on the old scorecard. No, yes, he doubled. Pete Alonso doubled, so it's 2 outs and nobody on. Soto, 2 outs, nobody on. Soto gets a base hit through the right field hole. Alonso doubles, and then Jeff McNeil steps up at 2 outs and he gets an RBI, 2 RBI hit. And that's been something the Mets have struggled with a lot all season long, getting RBIs with 2 outs. They have struggled a lot with getting RBIs and 2 outs. And I thought last night, Jeff McNeil came through big there with a 2-out RBI single. And just the Mets overall getting a nice 2-out rally with 2 outs and nobody on, getting a nice 2-out rally with Soto, Pete, and McNeil. I thought that was really good to see. But they win the game 4-0. They split the series. They get back now. I'm not saying the Mets are, back to getting on a roll and winning games. We'll find that out this week. I'm already seeing some people say, "Oh, the Mets are back. They're going to get back to winning baseball games. That the 10 out of 11 stretch is over." But we'll find out in Pittsburgh if they can win if they can. They don't face Paul Skeens this weekend, so if they can win this, if they can look good in this series against Pittsburgh, whether 2 out of 3 or even a sweep, we'll find out. So we'll find out if the Mets are truly back, if they can continue this momentum into this weekend against the Pirates. But overall, very good last two games for the Mets after not after the first two games. Good job by the Mets to step up, get back on track a bit, get some wins over the Braves. Don't, you didn't want to go, you didn't want to get swept and lose 3 out of 4 at home after you just got swept by them a week ago and you lost 2 out of 3 to the Phillies. And speaking of the Phillies, in the middle of the Mets 4 game series with the Braves, the Phillies ended up getting swept by the Houston Astros. They got shut out back-to-back games, then they lost 2-1 the third game. So they scored 1 run in that whole 3 game series against the Astros. They get swept in Houston. So because of that, the Mets actually uh, the Mets actually won last night's game and got into first place. So after the Mets were out of first place for a couple of days, they now 4 days later are back into first place as they enter this weekend against the Pirates after the Phillies got swept by the Houston Astros. So the Phillies weren't able to continue their momentum again. It's a race, fellas. The division's not over in June or July. The division will be settled, as I said before, in the last week of September. Everything on the line. Will probably the Mets, Phillies, and I still think the Braves. But it's a race. A lot of Met fans saying, "Oh, Phillies are going to win this division." After the Phillies beat the Mets 2 out of 3, and the Mets were losing 10 out of 11. But it's June. It's a tight race. It's going to be flip flopping all season long from here on out to this point. So we'll see what happens. I think we'll see what happens. But as of now, for now, the Mets are a half game up on the Philadelphia Phillies in first place in the National East as they head to Pittsburgh. But like I said, good job by the Mets to at least, again, I would have preferred the Mets go win 3 out of 4. I think they should have won those first two games, lost 3-2 in game one, up 3-0, and then walked 3 straight guys and couldn't get guys out and gave off a 5 run inning in the sixth in game two. So they really should have won 3 out of 4 or even swept this series. But again, but even so, the Mets were able to come back, get the next two, at least get a split, and at least get some sort of momentum heading into Pittsburgh. And look, the stretch does get easier. Like I said, they're on the road now in Pittsburgh, and then they come back home to play a good Brewers team, and then on next weekend they play the Yankees at Citi Field. But they needed these 2 wins. They got these 2 wins. They had to at least split the series after losing the first two. So good job on the Mets for that. Big credit for them, and big credit again to the Mets pitching and their bullpen for stepping up the way they did last night after the unfortunate injury to Griffin Canning. And again, we wish Griffin Canning all the best because that really blows. You don't want to see that happen. You don't want to see you don't want to see an injury like that happen. So Griffin Canning's a good guy, good pitcher, and you hope he's back next year, ready to go. You hope he's back next year for the Mets, healthy, because he really was a big part of this rotation throughout this first half of the season. Um, so obviously the Mets head to Pittsburgh this weekend to play the Pittsburgh Pirates. Some moves needed to be made, obviously, not only with the injury to Griffin Canning, but the return of Mark Vientos. Now, Mark Vientos came back last night. He rejoined the Mets last night, but they didn't activate him. They activated him today. Mark Vientos has been activated from the injured list after spending a few weeks on the injured list. So it was curious to see who they would, who was going to be sent down. Was it going to be Jared Young? Was it going to be Black Beatty? Was it going to be maybe Ronnie Mauricio? Who was going to be two, whatever. Well, as it turns out, it was Jared Young. Jared Young got sent down to Triple A Syracuse to make room for Ronnie Mauricio, to make room for Mark Vientos. And Ronnie Mauricio, who the last 3 games, has swung a good bat. The last 3 games, he's swung a good bat, stays on the roster. So good for Ronnie Mauricio. He stays on the roster. Mark Vientos is back in the lineup today against for the Mets. He's DHing. I'm sure he'll be doing it with Mauricio and Beatty still on the team, at least until Jesse Winker comes back. I'm sure that might be when one of them gets sent down. But actually, Beatty and Mauricio really hit pretty well the last couple of games after Vientos made his return or was on his way back the last couple of games. But when Winker comes back, that's when you could see one of them get sent down. But we'll see. Winker's still working for his rehab assignments. But anyway, Vientos is back. He's in the lineup today. He's DHing. In other news, Griffin Canning's injury, Blade Tidwell is now back, and he's now back on the team. He's now back on the roster for Griffin Canning. So Blade Tidwell makes his return. Jose Azucar is back with the Mets on a minor league contract. He played in 12 games earlier this season, so he's back on a minor league deal. Austin Warren, who pitched really well for them last night, two and a third, stepped up big for Griffin Canning after he had to leave the game. He pitched really well, Austin Warren, but he was sent down today. He was optioned to AAA Syracuse. Colin Poche will replace him on the Colin Poche is taking his spot on the roster. I think there was another move they made. Let's see. Let me just double check and make sure. Griffin Canning, Tidwell, Colin Poche, Mark Vientos reinstated. Um, and Azucar, Jared Young, Warren option. Oh, yes, Richard Lovelady was outright at AAA Syracuse. He elected free agency in lieu of accepting his outright assignment, so he's now a free agent. Azucar, of course, was signed. So that was another flurry of moves by the New York Mets as they've been mixing and matching now their whole roster because of the injuries to the pitching staff now. Of course, Canning now to go along with Senga and McGill and the return of Frankie Montas, but also waiting on Sean Manaea, who Sean Manaea a few days ago was had a bit of a setback. Apparently during his rehab assignment, he felt some, as I said, loose bodies in his elbow. They shut him down for at least the next 2 or so days. He is apparently still scheduled to make his next rehab start next Tuesday or Wednesday, and we'll see what goes from there. But again, obviously not what you wanted to hear. Now, not what you want to hear if you're the Mets, to hear that one of your top pitchers who is still on the way back and you need him now, especially, is having some problems with his elbow. Now, apparently you can pitch through it. I think even Ron Darling said he can pitch through it, but still, they had to shut him down for a couple days. He's going to make a rehab assignment. Apparently, according to David Stearns and Carlos Mendoza, he's going to make a rehab assignment next Tuesday and or Wednesday. That's his still scheduled date. So we'll see how it goes because the Mets really could use him right now. They could really use Sean Manaea right now with Senga out, McGill out, and now Canning out. They could really use Sean Manaea right about now. So hopefully his rehab assignment next week goes well. So we'll see how hopefully his rehab assignment for next week goes well. And sooner or later he's back with the team in the rotation because again they could really need him right now. And if, obviously also for optics, he was their big pitching acquisition or re-signing in the off season after his big season last year. You'd like to see him get back soon now since we're essentially, it's June 27th. We're approaching July now. It'll be July by the time he makes his next rehab start. July 1st, July 2nd. It'll be July 1st, July 2nd by the time he makes his rehab start. So anyway, we'll look at the Mets starting lineup for today as they face the Pittsburgh Pirates. The Pittsburgh Pirates are throwing in, I believe, Mitch Keller today on the mound. I believe Mitch Keller is pitching today for the Pittsburgh Pirates. Yes, he is. So Mitch Keller goes on the mound today for the Pirates against David Pearson. Pearson pitches tonight for the Mets as Pearson, he looks to bounce back after having a bit of a struggle in his last outing against the Philadelphia Phillies. Starting lineup today, Francisco Lindor, shortstop leading off, Brandon Nimmo left field batting second after Nimmo DH yesterday. Juan Soto in right field batting third, Pete Alonso at first base batting fourth. Jeff McNeil doing the center field work again. Jeff McNeil Wednesday made a terrific catch and robbed Marcell Ozuna for 2-run homer. Maybe the best catch we've ever seen Jeff McNeil make in center field ever. So, so very good job by McNeil on that play. Saved a 2-run homer on Wednesday. Mark Vientos, like I said, he's doing the DHing. Brett Beatty playing third base, batting seventh. Ronnie Mauricio batting eighth at second base. And once again, doing the catching is Hayden Sanger for the second time in 3 days. Obviously, the Mets are rotating the catcher spot. Torrens started the first 2 games against the Braves. He also started the last game against the Phillies. So 3 straight days. Sanger then caught on Wednesday. Torrens is back out there last night. And now Sanger is back out there tonight against the Pittsburgh Pirates, catching for David Peterson. So that's the lineup today for the Mets as David Pearson takes the mound against Mitch Keller. Tomorrow, Paul Blackburn will start again for the Mets at 4:05 against the Pirates, against Falter of the Pittsburgh Pirates. Bailey Falter of the Pittsburgh Pirates. Like I said, no Paul Skeens. The Mets will not face Paul Skeens in this series. Frankie Montas will then make his second start of the season on Sunday at 1:35. He'll make a second start of the season. against the Pittsburgh Pirates is Mike Burrows. So look, to preview the series, the Mets last time they faced the Pirates in Pittsburgh, excuse me, in Citi Field, the Mets are 2 out of 3. But that was also a very low scoring, battle heavy, very close kind of series that the Mets played against Pittsburgh. They didn't really run away with that series. Um, but this is the kind of but again, here we go. Mets are facing a team where you need to kind of take care of business against. You need to kind of win these games, maybe even a little convincingly if you can, but you really need to get by and win these games like they did against Colorado and like they did against Pittsburgh last time, even though that was a battle, and like they did against Chicago or the White Sox, even though again that was a bit of a battle. But again, Pittsburgh has trouble scoring runs, but they can pitch a little bit. Their starting pitching is still pretty good. But they can pitch a bit, but it's their offense that struggles. They don't really have many guys in that. There's really nobody in that offense that's really hitting. But again, the Mets offense themselves has had their inconsistencies, and the Mets pitching is in flux right now. They're a little banged up. So we'll see how the series goes. And obviously, again, we'll find out if the Mets can take these last 2 games that they did against Atlanta, and won those games to get back. And let's see if they can translate that over to this weekend. It's on the road. It's in Pittsburgh. The Mets just were on the road a few days ago. Now they're back on the road after just a short 4-game series against Atlanta. So now they're back on the road back in Pennsylvania, in Pittsburgh, PNC Park. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens this weekend. The Mets really need to take this series, not just to continue their momentum, but they're going to face the Brewers next week at home, and they're going to face the Yankees next weekend on July 4th weekend. So they really, really, really need to take care of business here, win this series against the Pirates. If you can sweep them, great. But I think if you're the Mets, you'll gladly take 2 out of 3 coming back again off a road trip. But the Mets have had they've had their inconsistencies in Pittsburgh. They've never really been a great team in Pittsburgh. They've always struggled. I think the Mets even lost 2 out of 3 to Pittsburgh last year. I could be wrong. But I think they lost a game to Paul Skeens, I think. But again, with no Skeens pitching, that's another reason. Again, I hate to keep harping the Skeens thing, but you kind of have to, right? You're not facing Skeens this weekend, so you really have to take advantage of that. Can they? Can their offense continue a little bit of momentum and get on a bit of a roll? Let's see. Can the Mets pitching? Can Blackburn step up tonight? Can Peterson bounce back from his last start against Philadelphia? Can Blackburn give him some innings? On tomorrow, can Montas do well in his second start? We'll see. We'll see. Can the offense continue their momentum? And, Soto continues his hot streak, and maybe Pete can start getting going again. He had a couple of hits last night. Maybe Pete can start getting going again. Maybe Lindor can get going again a bit. We'll see how Mark Vientos progresses. Obviously, now because again, now that Vientos is back, I said before, he now needs to hit. He wasn't hitting much. You know, he wasn't hitting much before his injury, and he hit a bit in AAA, but now he's back in the big leagues. And now he needs to get back going. Now he needs to hit. Now he needs to show the Mets the talent and the power that he had last year. Because if he can do that, that's a big plus for a lineup that really needs in the middle of the order, especially with the bottom of the order with being so iffy, right? With Beatty, Mauricio, and now the flip flop, and now the whole catcher situation. They really need that meat and middle of the order to be productive, right? Lindor, Nimmo, Soto, Alonso, McNeil, Vientos. They really need those top 6 guys to be productive. And Vientos, if he can be the guy he was last year and hit for power and hit some home runs and be that slugger that he was last year, that's such a big plus. And then you could see Beatty or Mauricio. I know the Mets probably are going to be hesitant to put Vientos back at third base, and I understand he has struggles a lot at third base. But I think the ideal lineup is Marte at DH, Vientos at third. That's just me. That's just my opinion. But I know the Mets are probably not comfortable right now putting Vientos back at third base, considering his struggles. And Beatty has been the better defensive third baseman, even though he's had his struggles at the plate. Over the last couple of days, he's hit the ball well, but we'll see. I think the ideal, though, lineup for the Mets is Vientos at third, starting at third base, and Marte at DH. Starling Marte has been very good at DH this year. He has hit the ball well. I think Marte should be the everyday DH. And I would put Vientos at third and just hope Vientos can get better at third base because they really need that. But we'll see. I get the sense, though, the Mets are not comfortable putting Vientos back at third base so soon. Hopefully soon. Maybe tomorrow he's back at third because he did play third base for an inning, for a full 9 innings in AAA a couple days ago. But he's had his troubles at third base all year this year. So we'll see what happens. But they really need Vientos, in my opinion, to start third base, at least give you average defense at third base, and they can start Marte at DH, and all of a sudden you have a 7 now because Marte has hit really well this year. So now you have 7, and if Vientos can hit the ball, can hit well. Now you have 7, and you go, okay, now we just need to figure out 8 and 9. Whether it's Mauricio, whether it's Beatty, you know, whether it's Mauricio, whether it's Beatty, and hopefully Alvarez can come back. Hopefully Alvarez can be good at AAA and he can come back and the Mets can, get the Alvarez they saw 2 years ago. So we'll see what happens. But there's a lot they need to sort out and a lot they need to figure out as the first half continues and as they get to the second half with that last three with those 3-4 spots in the order. DH, third base, second base, catcher. They need to figure that out. They'll get Jesse Winker back hopefully soon, so that's going to be a +2 for the DH spot at the left-hander's position, and of course for the outfield, of course. So getting Winker back would be nice depth. Getting Winker back would be nice depth, but we'll see. There's a lot they need to figure out in the 3-4 spots in the order. Along with things they need to figure out in the bullpen, a lot of things they need to figure out in the starting rotation. So we'll see what happens. But big series against the Pirates coming up. I think they really need to go into Pittsburgh and kind of take care of business and go win some games there, and and get your record up again and continue the momentum that you've had in the last 2 games against the Atlanta Braves. So that'll be it for this edition of Mazza on Mets. We'll be back on Sunday. I'm thinking about Sunday evening, Sunday night after their game, after their series at 1:35, their series against the Pirates. We'll talk about the series against Pittsburgh. Actually, you know what? We'll do a show on Monday because Monday's the Mets off day. So we'll be back on Maz on Mets on Monday for the Mets off day, a Mets off day edition. Mets off day edition. We'll recap the series against the Pirates, and we'll preview their series against the Milwaukee Brewers as the Mets approach a rematch with the team that they defeated in the National League Wild Card Series just a year ago. But again, yeah, that'll be it for this edition of Mazza on Mets. Thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you very much for listening. I've been your host, Evan Mazza. I will see you on Monday. Have a great day, and let's go Mets.